everybody, and thanks so much for joining us for our 50th Earth Day celebration this week and our celebration of Earth Week all week. We're so happy to join you virtually from the comfort of your own homes. My name is Allison Martin. I'm the environmental educator for Valencia Soil and Water Conservation District. My main job here is to interact with our community members in various ways, and I'm right now here at Whitfield Wildlife Conservation Area. I'd like to take a moment right now to thank Facebook Las Lunas Data Center for being able to do this video for us. I'd also like to thank our friends of Whitfield for providing environmental education programs and opportunities here at Whitfield for the last 10 years. We'll also be able to give away prizes later on in the video, so we're very excited to be able to offer that as well. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. Usually we're out here in the conservation area doing interactions and talking about nature, but there are many ways that we can bring the conservation area and some of the things that we do here back to your own backyards and your own spaces that you're at. I thought I'd start out first by talking a little bit about Whitfield Wildlife Conservation Area. Before we were Whitfield, we were a dairy farm, and the district took it over after that dairy farm about 10 years ago as a project to restore habitat. So as you can see, it's very beautiful right now, and we've had a lot of volunteers plant over 7,000 native trees and shrubs in the conservation area and up here by the visitor center. So behind me is our building here, and then over here we have an example of a pollinator habitat garden. So some of the things that are coming in right now for you to see are our chocolate flowers. They do smell like chocolate, and pretty soon we'll start seeing the bees, and I saw a lot of hummingbirds in this area this morning. So this was one of the projects that we've worked on over the years up here, and it's really flourishing and coming in great. We got our desert willows coming back, some cacti, some yucca. It's just really doing well over here. Okay, so now we're just a little bit south of the visitor center building here. So I'd like to kind of show you our cactus garden. We have a lot of different cactus that are growing right now. They're just coming back in. Beautiful flowers growing at our cactus garden. This was one of our most recent projects done within the last 5 years by many different volunteers. Planted that. We also had a volunteer that put together the bench here at the end of this path. And we also have a path over here with a lot of labels, so folks are able to come and learn about the local plants that are native to New Mexico, to this area. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is make our way into the conservation area and begin our lessons for today. So what you're going to need is, all of you will need a piece of paper or a journal and a pencil or a pen. And so what you'll be doing is you'll be doing these exercises with me as we go through the conservation area today. And I hope that you'll be able to expand on these lessons while we're all home and be able to introduce these lessons to other family members and other friends. And so we can all kind of have fun interacting with nature while we're in the comfort of our own homes. So I will see you all in a few minutes. So go grab those pencils and paper, and I'll meet you in the conservation area. Okay, so here we are at our first stop in the conservation area. We're in the riparian area, so all of this is in the floodplain. Well, what makes a riparian area? This is a great example. Right behind me, we have a pond here. Throughout the year, it'll go up and down, and so that'll show us where the water is underneath the ground. Basically, what happened was a giant hole was dug, and so all of the water filled in, and so this water is always here all year long and has created awesome habitat. So some of the habitat that you can see in this area are the cattails here that surround the pond. Some of the animals that like to hide in these cattails are our geese, our ducks. We'll even sometimes see snakes that slither around in these cattails. We have a lot of bullfrogs and turtles, and a lot of small insects like dragonflies love to hang out in these cattails. So throughout the year, we'll see some different creatures kind of interacting and living among these cattails. Another great habitat are a lot of these cottonwood trees that have grown up along the pond here. And so they create great habitat for the birds to kind of sit and talk with each other. Birds also like this thing right behind me, this bat box here. So the bats like to hang out inside the bat box during the day, but the birds will like to sit at the top of the bat box and talk to each other. And what they do is they sit there for a long period of time, and then at the bottom of the bat box we'll see a whole lot of white, and the kids always know that that white is bird poop, and then that ultimately leads to an hour conversation about scat, which is always a fun, exciting topic. So what we're going to do here at our first stop is I'm going to introduce our first lesson, which is nature journaling. And this is something that you can do in many different ways. So if you're very curious on how to nature journal, there are many great resources out there. But for today, we're going to nature journal what's in your backyard. So what I'd like you to do is go outside and find something to draw, as long as it's natural. So you could draw a tree, you could draw a whole landscape, draw whatever you want, but make sure that you label your drawing. So you're going to label today's date, whatever date that is that you're watching this video. And I'd also like you to label the time, and maybe the cloud cover is a great thing to remember when you're drawing. You always want to label what you're drawing as well. So if you're drawing a tree, make sure to put the different parts of a tree. And then after you're done drawing, I'd like you to think of every animal that interacts with whatever it is that you drew. So if you drew a tree, how many animals would interact with that tree and use that tree as habitat throughout the course of an entire year? So you're going to have a really big list here. And one other thing I'd like you to do is think about what questions you have. So whenever you're drawing something, you're always thinking of questions. What questions do you have? And write at least one of those questions down. And see if you can get with a mom or dad or sister or brother or grandma and have them help you answer those questions. And the very last thing, after you're done nature journaling, what I'd like you to do is think about if whatever you drew is no longer there. So for instance, if I drew this pond right here and all of a sudden the water was completely gone the next day, how many of those animals that you drew would be affected by that resource missing? How many could not survive? So now you're going to go through and cross off all of the animals that need that resource to survive. This is a great lesson to really show the connections of the ecosystem and how many different plants and animal species need each other for survival. So go ahead and go outside and enjoy your nature journaling activity, and I will meet you at our next location. Okay, so here we are at our next location in the conservation area. And right here, I'd like to talk a lot about trees. So we see trees all over the place. We see them in the riparian area. We see them in the upland area, in the mountains. We see a lot of different kinds of trees, but not all trees grow in the same area. So why is that? And what trees do you have that are near your home? So some ways to identify trees when we don't know what sort of trees that we have is to kind of get some facts about them that we see and can identify with our eyes here. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to get your notebooks out and find some trees that are in your area. You may need to walk down the road a little bit, but find at least 2 different trees and see if you can help to identify what those trees are. So here's some ways that I would try to identify this tree if I didn't know what kind of tree that it was. So first of all, I would look at the tree and look at the size. And I would write down that this tree is fairly big. So I would write down words like large, big. I would say it's probably older than 3 years old because of the size of it. And then I would get a little bit of a closer look, and I would bring in and look at some of the leaves of the tree. And I would say that the leaves are fairly round and they're a light green right now, and it looks like it's very healthy. I see a lot of leaves on this tree, and also I don't feel any spikes or thorns, so I would say it's fairly smooth on the branches. And so I would then sketch this tree or take a photo of it and try to see if I could find out what sort of tree it is and why it's growing here. Let's head on over to this other tree and see if we can figure out some of the differences from our first tree that we saw and wrote down to our next tree over here. So over here we have another tree which is very close to where that other tree was, but it looks very different. So now let's kind of look closer at some of these differences that we see with this tree. First of all, I don't see any leaves, so I'm going to mark down in my notebook that I don't see any leaves on this tree. But I do see something, and I'm going to go get a closer look at that. And that's right over here. I see this kind of screw thing, and it's kind of hard to describe, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this. And I'm going to draw this into my notebook and kind of talk about what it feels like, that it's kind of bumpy, and it looks like there's a lot of them coming out, and I want to know what this is and why it's growing on this tree. So I would write that down. Also, as I'm looking at this branch, I'm noticing that there's lots of little spikes. So I would write down that there's thorns on this tree. And I do notice a lot of different branches that are the same size that are coming out, but it's a lot smaller of a tree. So I would mark down that this is a lot smaller of a tree, but it has many different branches that are coming out, a lot more than we saw with that giant trunk on that other tree. So these are some of the things that I would write down with this tree. And then once I find out more information about this tree and my first tree, I'm really curious why they're growing in the same location. Is this a good location for these trees to grow in and thrive in? So take about 10 minutes and go see if you can find at least 2 different trees or bushes from wherever you're at near your home and see if you can find some more information about those trees. Okay, so really quick, I'd like to take a moment and talk a little bit about invasive species and how invasive species can take over an area. We have a lot of different invasive species that you can see right here at Whitfield, and you may be able to identify these species where you live or have seen these before. And so one of the first ones is going to be right over here. This is called a salt cedar. And a salt cedar is very invasive, and one of the things that it does to get invasive is it takes a lot of water. And the salt cedar will actually take water from other plants. And you'll notice that not many plants will grow near a salt cedar because it'll actually take the water from the plants to feed itself and develop a very strong root system. And that root system pushes other plants out, and therefore this plant gets invasive very, very quickly, and it's hard to get rid of. This plant is also a fire hazard. It catches fire very easily, but because it's such a hardy plant, it can actually re-establish even if it has fire damage. So this is a plant that we find all along the riparian area and along the Rio Grande, which is just 1 mile this way of us. And we see this plant in a lot of different places. And so another one that we have very close to this salt cedar is right over here. And this is a Russian olive. And the kids always laugh at me. And they say, Allison, a Russian olive is not from New Mexico. It's from Russia because you said Russian olive. And I say, you're correct. So you knew that this tree is not native to New Mexico. And again, the Russian olive, as you can see, is a very large tree. It has a large root system as well. And one of the things that help make it invasive is right here, the little olive seeds. And what happens is these seeds are part of many birds' diets, and they'll eat these seeds, and then, just like anyone else, they poop out the seeds and up grows a tree. So the birds help us to distribute these seeds, and then therefore there's more Russian olives all over the place. Even though this tree gets very large and it's very invasive, again, it is a food source to some animals. So some invasive species are not always completely bad. One thing that makes an invasive species is poor soil. And we have a lot of poor soil all along the Rio Grande River because we don't have natural flooding. So the river doesn't naturally flood in this area, and we don't have new organic matter changing out in our soil. And so we get plants that are able to grow in soil that's not as great as it once was. And some plants that really like to grow are weeds, and we have a lot of weeds. And some examples of weeds are going to be right down here. So you can see how easy weeds take over an area, and they're able to then flush out anything else that grows in this area. So as you walk outside, you'll probably be able to find some invasive species near your home, and you'll probably be able to find many different weeds that are growing around the area. And so now you know some of the reasons how invasive species can start, and what are the reasons why we see so many invasive species in this area. All right, I'll meet you at our next stop for our next activity. All right, we are now at one of my favorite stops in the conservation area, and we are looking at the largest cottonwood tree that we have on the property. We estimate this cottonwood tree to be about 100 years old, which is about as long as cottonwood trees live. And what's really neat about this tree is we can also see the natural process of how a tree dies. So if you notice, the difference between this cottonwood tree than the other ones that we saw by the pond is, of course, the size. And another thing is we have a lot less limbs, and we notice there's not a lot of new growth. A lot of the leaves on the tree are from last year. So we see the tree is slowly dropping those limbs. They're slowly dying. The bark on the tree is slowly starting to come off, and that's a natural process. Something that you can do at home every day is do phenology. And what phenology is tracking data of different tree species or any plant species near your home, or look at other data that others have been tracking. We track phenology here at Whitfield with our students, as well as many adults come and track data. And how you'll be able to do that is by downloading either the iNaturalist or Nature's Notebook app. And you can download these on any phone or any laptop or computer. And you can start tracking data of maybe cottonwood trees near your house. And what's neat about cottonwood trees is they change often. We have female cottonwood trees that produce cotton and male cottonwood trees that produce the pollen. And you'll be able to see the differences throughout the year, and you can track that data, and you can then watch as that data changes from year to year. So really neat apps to download during this time while we're all home. So what I'd like you to do is get your notebooks back out, and we're going to now do an outdoor scavenger hunt. So who likes scavenger hunts? I do, and outdoor scavenger hunts are the most fun because you can do whatever you want. But for this one, I'd like you to label it signs of an animal. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for signs of an animal, and you're going to do this right outside of your home. So how do we look for signs of an animal? What are some ideas? Well, one thing you could do is look for scat, as we've been talking about, right? What scat are we finding? But we don't want to get too close, right? So from a distance, what is in the poop? What are the animals eating? Do we see fur? Do we see berries? How large is the scat? Are there footprints? Do you see footprints in the dirt? Do you see feathers on the ground? Do you see a nest up in a tree? Do you see a hole in the ground? These are ways to look for signs of an animal. This is a great time for you to grab your binoculars and look for birds in the sky, or hear and listen for birds. So I'd like you to find at least 3 signs of an animal on your scavenger hunt. And then when you're done with that, I'd like you to think about your senses. So whenever we're outside, we want to think about what we're seeing, and we want to write down our senses. So I'd like you to now in your journals, before you do your scavenger hunt, I'd like you to write down what you see. And then I'd like you to write down what you hear and what you smell. And then write down something that you feel? What can you pick up that's near you that you can feel? And draw it or write about it. And then instead of tasting, because we don't want to taste anything that's out in nature, I'd like you to write down what should you see more of but don't. So really think about what you're not seeing and why you're not seeing more of something or at all in the location that you choose right outside your house. So enjoy your scavenger hunt and enjoy learning about your senses, and I'll see you back at our last stop in the conservation area for our final activity here. Okay everybody, welcome back. We are at our final stop here at Whitfield today. So right now I'd like us to really think about some of the changes that we can see every day that we're doing to our land. And so what I'd like you to do is get your notebooks out and let's write down every single human impact that we can see in the areas that we're in right now. So where I'm at, I would talk about the concrete ditch over here that I can see. So this is a human impact, and we know that because it's not naturally occurring. And even these stumps right here where the students normally sit, these were cut down and placed here. So I would call those a human impact. And when we look at the path here, this was created so we would have a walking path through the conservation area. And just right beyond the path here, we have a fence. And this fence extends all the way along our path, and that's also a human impact. If we look even further, we can see buildings and houses and power lines and cars and roads, and those are all human impacts. And sometimes we even hear trains and planes, and those are human impacts as well. So all of the human impacts that you can see of changing the land in your area, I'd like you to write all of those down. And after you're done writing those down, I want to bring us back to really thinking about how we can make small changes even at our own homes during this time. So I would like you to go ahead and leave your comment with how you believe that you can help protect this planet into the future and something you can do from your own home, and then leave that comment on this video below. And I'd like you to hashtag Earth Week, because this week we are remembering that it is Earth Week and the 50th celebration of Earth Day. We're going to be giving away 5 garden starter kits and 1 iPad to stay digitally connected during this time. And we'll be picking those winners at the start of next week. So you have all week to kind of think about how you'd like to interact with the earth, how we can work together to protect our planet into the future. And I wish everybody well and a safe time during this pandemic. And I'd like to leave Whitfield with that. And I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today. And again, thanks to Facebook for allowing us to do this video, and our friends of Whitfield for providing environmental education opportunities here at Whitfield. So now I'd like to go over to Lindsay Diaz to our gardens as she talks about composting and different ways that we can compost, as now is a great time to go ahead and start gardens and grow our own food for the summer. Goodbye, everybody.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the El Cerro Mission Community Garden. My name is Lindsay, and today I'm going to share with you how to make compost. Compost? What's compost? Well, compost is decomposed plant material all the way down into soil. So why is that important, I might wonder? Well, compost is important if you want to create a healthy soil for starting a new garden. Every year, gardeners add compost to their soil in order to provide a rich texture that holds in moisture and provides nutrients to all the plants. It also provides a nice habitat for microbia and fungi, which is important for plant development as well. So, who's ready to make some compost? All right, let's go do that. All right, this is our compost pile at El Cerro Mission Community Garden. I want to show you how we made it first. You can see we just used some old pallets. We wired them together at the corners, and then we put these stakes in the ground so it doesn't move. These were all free materials, actually. There's a bunch of other ways you can make a compost pile as well. Right over here, I'm going to show you another one. All you do is wrap wire around and then secure it on one end. This would be a little bit of a small size, and I would recommend doing a little bit larger because you're going to see that the materials add up pretty quickly. And then in the back here, we have a larger type of wire bin, and we've put some weed mat to secure it so that the materials don't fall out. This is a rather large bin, and this would be something better like if you had a lot of materials, like on a farm, or if you had a lot of animal manure, that would work too. And then the last bin I'm going to show you is right over here. Some people like to use a bin like this because it stays a little bit cleaner, and it also is a little less smelly, let's say if you live near other folks. Now I'm going to show you what we put inside of our compost to actually make the compost. The first ingredient is what you call the green parts. You're going to use any kind of plant materials, but the most common plant materials you're going to use are kitchen scraps from your kitchen. This is from my own kitchen. Let's see what we have in here. We have some stalks of vegetables that we used. We have some lemon peels. But notice this, we also have some coffee grounds, and I don't think we can see it in here, but I also have some eggshells in here as well. Eggshells are going to be the only material you want to use from animals. You don't want to use inside the eggs, and you don't want to use any meat or dairy products. Also, don't add any oil. That might disrupt it as well. The second green part that you might have at your own home is manure. We have horse manure here, but you could also use chicken manure or rabbit, sheep, goat, cow. You just don't want to use dog or cat excrement. It could be a little dangerous. That's called the green layer. Now I'm going to show you the brown layer. Right over here is the brown layer we're using today. This is just dried grass clippings that we have. If you're going to use grass clippings like this, make sure you don't have any seed heads, or you're just going to be adding weeds to your compost, and we don't want more weeds in our garden. Other things you can use are straw, or leaves, or even shredded newspaper if that's all you have. The last ingredient to your compost is just a little bit of soil, and I'll show you that part at the end. We're going to want 2 parts of green layer to 1 part of the brown layer. So we're going to have 2 buckets of the green and 1 bucket of the brown. Now when you're loading your brown into the bucket, you want to make sure it's pretty packed in there, because this one has a lot more air than this one does. And I'd say that's pretty good. We don't need to be exact, okay? So as you get comfortable with this, you can start to estimate a little better, okay? All right, you ready to load the compost? Here we go. So I'm gonna take this green layer first. This is gonna be your smelliest layer, so it's good to put it on the bottom. Woo! I'm going to use a shovel to spread it around so I don't get it all over my hands either. Good. Next, I'm going to put the horse manure. Now, if you don't have manure at home, don't worry about it. You can just use kitchen scraps, all right? Next, I'm pretty informal about this. I'm just going to use a little bit of this dirt from the side and sprinkle it on. All of that really helps to keep the scent down, and it gets the process going a little bit faster. Last, we put the brown layer. Let me show you some old compost that we made. This compost has been sitting around for a long time, so if we actually just go to the bottom of it, we're going to get some nice, fresh compost. Here we go. Wow, look at that color, everybody. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for that dark, rich earth color. Do you see the difference between our native soil and this soil? That's what's really going to add the nutrients to our soil and create the rich texture we're looking for. Okay. That's it, everybody. That's how you make compost. Now, if you want to speed up the process, the next step would be in a few months, about when this is about this high, you would turn it all over with a shovel. You could do that by putting it in a new spot and making a new pile with it, or just turning it in place. That will speed up the process of making your compost. All right, thank you everybody for joining us today in making compost and celebrating this wonderful earth. Happy Earth Day!